Today, let's break down the complexity of painting water. I'll show you tips and techniques that I use in the field and in the studio to make my best paintings of water. Water is so beautiful and it looks like there's so many elements, but if we start at the very beginning with a still body of water, this is going to help to really get things started on the right foot. I have an idea called Fade of the Sky, which basically shows that the horizon is not white, as is shown in many photos. The bands of color or soft transitions become a great foundation for building the concepts to make a water painting. Do practice bands of color before going to a rushing stream or an ocean scene. Other examples of how soft transitions can be used in a scene include a marina painting and reflected lake scenes. Color and value are interrelated. And I know I keep showing this simple graphic, but I do find it's great to have kind of a crude example for students to kind of calm down and make little doodly sketches. Sometimes we forget that it could really be as simple as bands of color and adding some dots. Here's an example of Fade of the Sky at work with the complex version on the right and the super simple graphic on the left to show you how they are related. Now let's look at adding some objects plus Fade of the Sky. Here's water lilies and pebbles on the shore. So with the water lilies, you could see how the Fade of the Sky would help you understand this more complicated scene and simplify it. Same thing with all of these pebbles on the beach. If you go back to Fade of the Sky, it helps you out. Now let's incorporate this simple graphic to help us understand more about water and reflections. First, let's understand what is the water line. It's straighter than you think, as you can see in these two examples. Next up, we're going to be looking at the concept of reflections and less than. So if we take a complicated scene, you can see the pull-out color swatches where we have the reality of the object, and then the reflection is less than in the case of the light object and less than in the case of the dark object. Reflections can be straight or angled. Let's take a look at these measurements in accordance with the water line. You can see that rounded shapes or straight shapes are going to be reflected in equal measure. Here's some examples of the horizon line plus objects reflected in the water. Also, there are times when you have angles on the shoreline. Most scenes incorporate a little bit of both, but keep your far horizon line mostly straight. Now we're going to look at some masterwork examples that showcase the concepts presented so far. Notice the faded blue in the sky, which is also reflected in the water. And these water reflections show the building and then how it's reflected in the mostly still water or slightly more agitated water. In this Soroya painting, he's working with different bands of blue to indicate the water. But you can see these artists were having the reflection be either a major part of their design or quickly dashing in some of the components we've looked at, and understanding these rules is going to give you a fluid and easygoing nature with your paintings, and it won't be so stressful to create your water paintings. This is whether you use boats or just nature for inspiration. Now I'll share with you my 3 types of water, which I feel really break down the categories into manageable chunks so that you can sort your reference and make a better painting. My type 1 water is still water. In applying the previous tools, we can understand that we have the horizon line is straight. The sections that represent the sky and the water are bands of color that employ that fade idea or ombre of shifting from blue to a darker blue at the viewer's feet. Plus, we could look at the measurement intervals and see that the cloud bank on the far horizon actually is the same measurement to where it reflects into the mirror of the sky. Understanding the previous components where they're broken down is important for when you're translating a landscape. Mirror reflection is easy to get over involved with, so do keep it simple and blur a lot of the edges. It's not really in the best interest of making a painting to have this be really crisp. This also applies to ocean scenes where you could see the ocean has somewhat agitation, but overall it's reflecting here the blue sky combined with the gray clouds. Type 1 still water is very transparent, and you can see near the viewer's feet, you can almost see directly into the water. There's a little bit of obscurity, but not much. And as the eye is tilted towards the horizon, there will be less and less looking into the water, and gradually reflection will take over. Now we'll look at mid-agitation water, where basically the mirror and all of the reflections are getting shattered to some degree. It's as if the components in the area of reality, such as the sky here, are put in a blender and kind of slide towards the medium range and usually a bit grayer. We'll look at waves and distinct water patterns in the last part of the lecture, but let's look at what broken and midtones are going to do in these lake examples first. Just to review, this is what mirror reflections look like with very little agitation. Now let's look at the same lake and see what happens when water is agitated by the wind or waves. All right, in this photo of the same lake, you could see that overall the water is less transparent and there is also less reflection. So we still have the sky ambient color reflected in the water, but with mid-agitation, everything gets a little bit darker than in the previous one. And also that's because cloud cover is a bit more prevalent here. And we have other things that are happening. We're starting to get a few light shards, these wiggles that are happening in the water. We have a lot more ripples going on. The third type of water is often a mix of the previous two types, but it includes foam, crashing waves, and tumbling waterfall scenes. In a full agitation or full motion moment, the water really presents as just a white, puffy cloud with very little form whatsoever. So the interesting component is to understand the previous two still water moments and mid-agitation, because it's nice to be able to classify those different types and understand how they're spliced together. Waves, of course, have a certain type of form to them, the curl of the actual crashing ocean wave or puddles on the beach, but those are some extra details just beyond the scope of this video. I do offer classes on how to paint water, lakes and streams, water reflections in depth and different types of colors, and also ocean scenes, beaches, and rocks and waves. So do check out some classes that I have online if you're interested in that. Let's take a closer look in this example on how full agitation with opaque foam can mix with other types of water, such as mid-agitation or even still water on occasion. Here you can see me creating a painting on location, keeping my horizon line straight and using all of my water levels, including areas of still water, mid-agitation, and then the third level of full motion. Now let's actually take a look at that white. And what is white? We could see that the camera has bleached this out. I guarantee if we were there on location that we would be seeing nuances in this area. This is where photos fall down on the job a little bit. Anyway, so to review, we have still, mid, and high agitation for the water. Sometimes I do like working from video because it gets a little bit blurry and a little less defined, and I find that there are times when I might pull my image to a video frame. I get to select which one. I can have this go in slow motion, and there's something about being able to move back and forth. The lines aren't quite as sharp as modern iPhones will dish out. If we look at this with regard to the movement that we see, there's a silky quality to it. We could start thinking about the gesture
So I think it's very important with water. It's not just a static image. What we want to capture in our painting is this idea of the flow and then reality. And if you look at the top part of this where we have reality, we see there's a lot more going on here. And basically the water is looking like a more unified area. So that would be another thing to avoid, which is kind of the pitfall of too many striations.
Remember not only to simplify, but try to clarify what type of water you're painting. That should keep everything on track and help your project go more smoothly. Well, I hope that helped take a look at how to get everything simplified and make your best painting. Thanks for joining me today. Do like and subscribe. It helps my channel grow. I appreciate you being here, and until next time, happy painting.